This is the Virtual Dream Journal for December 7th, 2018. I've been looking into some documents for the ideal placement of surface electromyograms. For the most part, there isn't much deviation between the documents I looked at, which is promising for the tolerances I'll be working with here. With that in mind, I'm reviewing the layer information for the compositional plates of the Virtual Reality Rig's suit. The outermost layer will mostly be a structural component, so having a material that is strong enough to avoid bending too much while still being able to protect the internal components would be ideal. I'm looking into PVC, aluminum, and steel for this layer. It doesn't have to be particularly tough at the end of the day, since this isn't going to be used for any particularly dangerous or risky environments, and in all likelihood will spend most of its time inside of the VR rig's capsule, so this won't really need to be all that strictly tested. I'll be leaving this layer for last though, since it's the least important really. The next layer is the general forming layer and will be composed of a lightweight, flexible material that is able to hold its form. This has already been determined and has even been purchased. It will be EVA foam. It is heavily used in cosplay and works out fairly nicely for the most part. I do intend to reinforce the structure using some threaded steel wire though to create a bit more of a wireframe system around things. This should help to add a bit more rigidity and make it a little bit easier to add the outer plating layer once things are close to done. With the EVA, a full-on network of passages, routes, and compartments will be set up for the electronics of the system. I'll add some more fire-resistant materials along these channels in order to help deal with critical failures in the system, though I intend to make the system divided enough so that the system can still function should any one of the plates fail. This is in order to mitigate the long-term risk of having a failure, short, or a fire of any small portion of the rig spread out to cause complete failure of the whole suit. With the kind of money I plan on investing on this thing, with the expectation to have little or no return at all, it's not exactly a fun idea to think about. Once we get past the EVA foam layer comes the flexible layer. I'm still thinking about the exact material I'll be using here, though it being some kind of memory foam is the most likely outcome. This layer is going to be necessary in order to help improve the amount of contact that the next layer will make with my body, in addition to just generally increasing the comfort of the whole system. The choice to have this layer actually kind of invalidated a big point of working out really lately, which was to get a body that would be more strictly defined in order to not really interfere too much with the VR rig's general operations in the event that I fluctuate too much. Still, I'm not exactly giving up my gains just because my VR suit doesn't 100% need it, especially since the increased muscle mass and reduced fat ratio benefits still stand regardless. The final layer that will play a role here is the contact layer. This layer will be composed of a flexible plastic or rubber coated in a minute, removable fabric film that will serve as the part that makes final contact with the skin. This layer serves for control assessment, haptic feedback, and climate control. The electromyograms have their electrode leads extend outward from the EVA foam layer, will have their ends reach this layer at set points for examination of muscle activity at that point. These ends will be composed of yet another material and will be directly interfacing with my skin as well. Whether these ends end up being made out of plastic, a gel, or a spongy material will depend on what works best while still having a tolerable degree of longevity and not interfering too much with the practicality of the suit. Haptics are the next portion here, and they're actually something I've been wondering about. Since I've opted to use linear resonant actuators to generate force and haptic sensations, I'm actually questioning whether or not I want them to make direct contact with the body at this position. I think an option that may allow for more fine-tuning would be to have the actual actuators situated either in the EVA foam or memory foam layer and link those actuators to this layer using a material extension like a bit of metal or plastic. The idea here being to allow for the dispersion of haptic feeling so that it isn't obvious that it's coming from a very exact point. I'll do some tests to see what the best result here is immersion-wise, and make my call from there. The final aspect here, the climate control system, will basically be the whole layer's composition, sans some small pockets for the former two elements. This layer basically amounts to a very thin pouch of water that connects to Peltier coolers as well as heating elements in an array. It will maintain an overall constant temperature in order to keep the body at its homeostatic temperature when human metabolic output and the output of the heating element array are considered. In order to better aid with immersion, this layer should be as thin as possible, not only to keep material costs cheap, but more than anything to accelerate the rate at which heating and cooling can balance out. This system, when the heating elements are turned off at a certain position, should rapidly drop in temperature to quickly apply a sense of cold, while likewise being able to rapidly heat up with the heating element in order to simulate heat. If I build a plate for each muscle, there should be no less than around 64 plates in total in this system, not counting the similar helmet that will be needed for the head, though that will have other specialized hardware at play. Once the final blueprints are drawn up and planned, these plates will more or less operate entirely the same as one another, with only some slight differences in the software applied to them, stemming from the need to consider their differing sizes, volume, shapes, and placements for the final algorithm. Until we reach the end stages of design, simple Velcro will be used to keep things together, but I'd love to have the time to make this entire plating system interconnect and lock into place using magnetic and hydraulic power for convenience. This system is meant to be the highest end VR system available in 2022, and while it doesn't really need the things I just mentioned in order to actually be able to accomplish most of what I want, I think that these kind of little touches help to really leave a very strong impression whenever you look at it. On occasion, letting the rule of cool win out here and there can be considered a reasonable investment. I am trying to fight a giant dragon using this thing after all. This has been the Virtual Dream Journal entry for December 7th, 2018.